regardless of why we're in this room today and the journeys that have led us here, we also have to acknowledge that we're standing on shoulders of many people. And I just realized why I'm emotional. So, my name is Bradley. My Jewish name is Ben Hakamin, which means the son of my people. And the name that was given to me by the ancestors in ceremony is a Black Hawk Man, and I get to sit with the Thunderbird clan. I'm also the manager for equity, diversity, and inclusion at the City of Winnipeg, and have had the amazing opportunity to work with some incredible people to bring this event together. But when we come together, it's important that we acknowledge the land we are on. And many of us are familiar with land acknowledgements now as part of the calls to action. But one of the teachings that I received was that the land acknowledgement was never just about ticking a box. You're being invited as a guest into someone's home, into someone's territory. And you are coming not only as a guest, but with intention. You're coming in a good way. So I'd like to approach that land and water acknowledgement today in a good way, to acknowledge that we are gathering here on what is referred to by many as Treaty 1 territory, and that Manitoba is also the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, the Anishinaabe, the Dakota, the Desolin, and the Nakota Nenaway nations. There are many other nations that came through this territory for trading, for hunting, for ceremony. We're also the birthland of the Red River Métis Nation. We also acknowledge that our drinking water, and in fact, all of the water for the City of Winnipeg for fire and paramedic services, it comes to us from Shoal Lake, which is in Treaty 3 territory. And the traditional guardians are referred to by settlers as Shoal Lake 39 and 40. We also acknowledge that our hydroelectricity water come to us from northern Manitoba in many other traditional territories. I'm a settler here. I'm also an immigrant. I am the child of immigrants, who they themselves were the children of immigrants. So in some ways, you could say that my story has been the story of colonization. My story has been the story of expansion and of economic prosperity that's often been built on the backs of those whose consent was not always taken or asked for. And so as an immigrant, as a guest, as a settler, I commit to the journey of reconciliation, which needs, first of all, to sit with the truth. We have to lean into the uncomfortable truths of how it is we got to here today. And I was thinking this morning, after I got up early and did some prayers, and was thinking about gender-based violence. And this weekend I was watching some historical dramas. You know, I love a historical romance, a good historical drama. And I was reflecting on how Western European cultures have weaponized violence against women for centuries. Intellectual violence, cultural violence, subjugation of body, of rights, of autonomy, of decision-making. If you liked it, you should put a ring on it. The ring was the symbolism of chattelship, right? Even the vows we offer in marriage, obedience for the woman. She was property, transferred from her father's ownership to her husband's ownership. So the violence that is gender-based, that is aggressive towards the feminine, is braided into Western European cultures in a number of different ways, which is why it's so incredibly difficult to remove and eliminate and address. It's why all of us have been doing this work for decades and decades and decades. I'm wearing a pendant that belonged to my grandmother. And I had some very interesting grandmothers. I had 3 grandmothers, and they were all representations of very different aspects and elements of life. But the grandmother who owned this one, she was very concerned about what people thought of her. The family name, the family legacy, manners. She changed 3 times a day. We dressed for dinner. She was brought up in that world. But interestingly enough, she also supported a woman's right to choose. She supported access to legal and safe abortion, which at the time was something that 99.9% of women in her class and education and status did not. And the reason she did, she shared with my mother. And my mother shared this story with me when I was a teenager. Because I also grew up in a Catholic family. And so being Catholic and being pro-choice was a bit of a dichotomy, bit of a tension back then. And it had turned out that her housekeeper's daughter had had what is called a back alley abortion in 1932 and got an infection and died. And died in my grandmother's kitchen at 2 o'clock in the morning. And she was 14 years old. And my grandmother at that point decided that, regardless of what the law said, that she could not believe that the God she believed in would allow that to happen, that a person's life would be taken, she said, because of the whims and willfulness of a man. Right? So in 1932, she made that decision. And, all of us have our own ancestral journeys. All of us have our own pathways of why we're here today. We bring all of those with us. And today, we're here to talk about, again, addressing the need for the elimination of gender-based violence. Last year, part of the intergovernmental working group that I'm a part of that does this day, we were talking about the theme and really wanted to be able to talk about bringing the voices of men and boys into this conversation, because at the end of the day, this is not a women's issue, just as abortion is not a women's issue. It is a humanitarian issue. It is a human rights issue, because I have a daughter, I have a sister, I have aunts. When we as men step into that space and place and support our non-binary, 2S LGBTQ, female-identified, female relatives, we do so from a place of strength and power, but we also do so in a place of humility, because we understand that it's a really important thing for us to do, right? We all know the statistics. Men are mostly the problem. That was one of the reasons why I resisted getting into men's work when I was called to it a number of years ago. I was like, oh, no. This little queer Jewish boy? No. Men, a lot of the problems, thank you very much. And I'm one of them, and I'm doing the best I can to help myself, but no, I don't want to go into that space for that. But it was actually Senator Murray Sinclair, who has now passed on, who I was very honored to spend time and space and place with. And for any of us in the room who have sat with him will understand what that means. There was something incredibly special about being invited into the space where he looked at you person to person across the table and a cup of coffee. And he had exhorted me to go into spaces and places and to talk, because he had said, when I go into a room, even with all of my experience, my titles, he said, some people still just see me as an angry Indian man, and that I should shut up and be happy with what I have and what we've done. And he said, but they'll listen to you differently, because they see you differently. And so I just want to let you all know that I see you. I see all of you. And it's important. that we see each other. Because when we see each other, we are completely unable to other each other. When I see you as a human, as a divine representation of Creator's gloriousness, in the fullness of who you are, there is no way I can other you. There is no way I can oppress you. There is no way I can diminish you. There is no way that I can insist that you become less than or smaller in order to make me feel more than or comfortable or stronger. So I would just invite you all to take a moment to look around this room, to those at the table with you and perhaps at the tables next to you, and to see each other as we come into this powerful place and space with intentionality. And now that we're here, we do have a little bit of housekeeping, right? There's some, practical things that we want to take care of. For those of you who have not been to the space and place here, to the museum, we do have washrooms that are available. They're just down the hall, so if you go out to the front, you turn to your left. They're just down here. They are multi-gendered washrooms, but each of the washrooms have stalls and doors and facilities, so you have your privacy taken care of, but you might find yourself washing hands standing next to someone who might be a little bit different, and that's okay as well, right? In the event of an emergency, we have a designated member of our team, Deanne, who would call 911. There are exit signs around that you can follow, and we go out through the group entrance, and the marshalling or mustering point is at the Gandhi statue. But no emergencies are going to happen. We are well and good and safe here. We do ask that you turn off your cell phones or turn them down or mute them. We do know that there are some folks here who have very important jobs in terms of immediate care and concern and well-being of individuals. So if a call does happen and you need to take it, we ask that you just leave the room as quietly as possible, take the call, and then feel free to join us when you can. Refreshments will be made available outside. We had a top-up of the tea and coffee, and around 12:30, a lunch will be served. The panel presentation will be happening at that time, so we just ask that you go out and you help yourself to the food and come back in a conscious manner. But we're also family here, right? And we understand that sometimes things happen, and that's okay. Because of the topic today, we've always been planning in a good way, and we took a trauma-informed lens, and so we do have trauma-informed care available today. So we have Rob and River here to offer their supports in person. We also have this available for those who are joining online. This is being streamed virtually right now as well. So for those of you who are watching online, they've already been given the information. There's a breakout room with trauma-informed care available there as well. Right? So if you do need to take a moment, you can either go through this door here at the front, or you can go out through the doors at the back and go to the side, and there is that care available for you as well. Feel free to help yourself to tea, coffee, juices, and we've got some water that's infused. It's got some mint and some cucumber, because that's good for the enzymes and it helps the body go in. It's a little bougie, and that's all nice and good. Because we need to take care of each other, right? Especially doing this work. This work can be a little bit heavy. I've referred to the team that brought together today, but I'm going to go into the official part of the program because, as many of you know, an event like this doesn't happen overnight, and it takes a lot of people with a lot of care and intentionality to make this happen. So I want to acknowledge the incredible work that is being done for murdered and missing Indigenous women, girl, two-spirit relatives with the Committee of Cabinet. Unfortunately, Minister Fontaine could not be here today. The People's House is still sitting in legislature. It has taken a little bit longer than initially planned. And so they are in the People's Building doing the people's work. And while they wanted to be here, and I say they, Minister Smith wanted to be here as well, and a number of the other ministers who have worked and lived this journey for a very long time. But it's important that we acknowledge the work that this government has done and is doing around this very important topic. And also acknowledge the work that is being done by MLAs in all the parties on this topic, right? Because this isn't a political issue, it is a human rights issue. And so we want to acknowledge that as well. We want to acknowledge the Human Rights Committee of Council for the City of Winnipeg, who is an amazing partner with the Equity Office, doing the Action and Awareness Speaker Series and the special events. And we have Ali Raposo, the coordinator, here today, so thank you, Ali. We also want to acknowledge all of the folks from the province who have helped us get here today. So if you will bear with me for a moment. It's going to be a little list, but not as weird of a list as like if I'm at the Oscars or something like that. Right. So we have from the City of Winnipeg representatives from the Equity Office, so myself, Bradley, I'm the manager for Equity, Diversity and Inclusion, City of Winnipeg Equity Office. And my colleague Deanne Burrell, who is the Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Coordinator, and our Administrative Assistant, Arshanor. We have Jessica Paley from the Indigenous Relations Division, and many of you know Jessica and the incredible heart and work that Jessica does in the community. We have Galocha Baru from the Community Development. Galocha has come back to us. He was in Australia completing his master's in conflict and peace resolution services. We have many other folks at the City of Winnipeg who touched this work. And I want to thank all of those who are here today. We have Deputy Shore, Jay Shore from Winnipeg Fire and Paramedic Services. And we have folks from Vehicle for Hire. We have folks from the Health and Safety Program, from Transit. We also have folks here from the Manitoba Public Service Commission. So we have Eileen White, who is the Director, People and Culture in the Public Service Commission, and a number of her team are here as well, and their support of this event was crucial. We have the Manitoba Indigenous Reconciliation Secretariat, Women and Gender and Culture. So we have Brandy Cable, Janae Danwich, and Laura Nickel, who have done incredible work. And then we also have with us today Sarah, and I think it's Schwindeman? Okay. From the Canadian Museum of Human Rights, who have graciously opened up their space for us here today. So if you've not been to the museum and checked out all of the amazing things that they have here for us, I would strongly encourage you to do that. And you can talk to Sarah about that, because believe it or not, we are incredibly, I'm not going to say the word lucky, because it wasn't luck. It was a lot of work and intention and care that got this museum here. We are one of the only museums in the world dedicated to human rights. And this was an inspiration that was informed in Washington, D.C., and in Tel Aviv, and throughout the cities of Europe. So to have that here in Winnipeg, it's an amazing thing. But that's because we're also so close to the geographic center, the heart, right? And the heart is what brings us to do our good work. This event is also recognizing some important days. Many of you are familiar with the 16 days of activism and the days that are around this, but I wanted to bring those forward just to remind us. So we have the Trans Day of Remembrance that occurred in November. We have the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women on the 25th of November. It was the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women, December 6th. the 16 days of activism goes from the 25th of November until December the 10th. And then, of course, we have Human Rights Day. And these days are important because they get us to focus, they get us to clarify, but they also remind us that this is a journey. It's not a race. And the idea of human rights is a relatively new one for our history as a human family. It's only been kicking around for 100 years or so. And when you think about the fact that we have been here for so long, it's encouraging to see what we're able to do when we come together. So we have some amazing people here today to bring their incredible wisdom. But one of the first ones that we're going to bring forward is Grandmother Denema. And many of you know this amazing individual and have been in space and place with her as well. So I'm going to let Grandmother Denema come introduce herself and share her wisdom to start us off in a good way. Thank you.
Good morning. C'est bonjour, Anine. Thank you for your beautiful words this morning and the way that you've opened up. My job is to offer a little bit of words. I don't want to say a prayer, but just some opening words just to remind us of why we are here and thinking about our creation. My name is Denema Morisseau. My spirit name is Bitwewe Benezik and Wawate Gabwik Dijnikas. I'm a Bear Clan and I'm a fourth degree Medewan person. I want to say to my team, Giganawe Namananek, that's sitting at this table here, and say miigwech for them for being here. And miigwech to all of you who have taken the time to be here at this important event, this Engaging Men for a Safer Tomorrow. Yeah, it's really important. I mean, I go to a lot of functions and conferences, and oftentimes the men are missing. In particular, when it's regarding issues around gender violence, in particular around MMIWG, two-spirit transgender relatives. There's a gap, and it's the fact that the men are not present. So I extend this say miigwech to the men who have taken the time to come and to sit at this table and to hear the words that will be spoken. I think about creation at this time. Every day we get up, we take a breath, we have life. We don't think about it, we just breathe and we have life. Each and every one of us got up today and we could do everything that we did so far today. Everything but taking that first breath. So I say, miigwech to Gijimanado, Mede Manado, Mishomasananek, Kokomasananek for miigwech Meno Bimadzuan for that life, for good life. I am grateful. I think about all of creation. I think about that grandfather who travels the daytime. We call him, in English, it's the sun, but we call him Medegizis. I think about that grandmother that travels the nighttime, Nibagizis Nokomis. And we know that together, they work together to ensure creation will flow, that everything will be as it should be. We don't think about those things. So it's time to just to reflect about this beautiful creation that we live in, and the way that we have life, and the way that the Creator saw fit to place everything here for a purpose and for a reason, and that everything has a purpose. And they all work in unison to ensure that life will flow. How absolutely wonderful that is, and that the Creator never forgot anything. I give thanks and think about the water, and in my understanding, the water, that spiritual water that sits at that third level, Medewabo. I also think about the water that flows here in this physical realm, and give thanks for that water. And that's and also something we kind of just take for granted. We don't think about it because we can get up, we can have that drink of water, we can have our bath, our shower, we can cook our food. It's just there. In my teachings, water is life. Water has a spirit. Water talks to us. Water sings. It's the most precious and beautiful medicine that the Creator saw fit to place here with us. So I give thanks for that. I encourage you, when you get up and you have that taste of water, just lift it up and say, miigwech, or thank you in your language, however language that you have. And we know that there are other indigenous cultures all through the world that have similar teachings about water and land and just creation itself. So just being really grateful for that. I think about our children all through creation, not just here, but everywhere. And I pray for them to be able to have people who are gentle with them, to love them and take care of them in a good way. I think about women and girls, men, boys, all through creation. And we know right now that the world is not a safe place as it used to be. There's lots happening all through the world. And most impacted are the elders, the women, the children are most impacted by what's happening. So I think about that. And for all of us to reflect on that, then just say a prayer asking Creator to look at peace. And so that's what I ask for all of you today, that we choose our words carefully, that we be mindful about how we are with each other. I was told as a child that, you be careful your words, because once you say them, they're gone out into the universe and you can't pull them back. So we want to be thoughtful. We want to be careful about how we are with each other in this room and as we walk out the door. And so I ask Creator, grandmothers and grandfathers, to sit with us and to be with us in a really good way and to help us do the work that needs to be done today. So that's all I want to say this morning. I say Kachi miigwech to all of you who are here, and I'm grateful to have been able to come again and say a few words. Joem nishnam gijanamanado. Joem nishnam gijanamanado. Joem nishnam gijanamanado. Joem nishnam gijanamanado. Miigwech ne kanagana. Miigwech.
Wow. I made a note that I was to inform all of you that the ASL is happening live, and so we want to thank our ASL interpreters that are here. This is not being added after the recording, so thank you all very much for that being here. And for those of you who are looking at the agenda, who are coming from a Western European lens, and you see a timeline attached to that, I want just right now for you all to take a deep breath in, hold, and breathe out. They are bumper rails. They are not exclusively aligned. We will do all that needs to be done here today, and it will happen in the time that we are here. One of the facilitation tools that I was trained in is cafe conversations. It's an element of deep democracy, and it teaches us that the only thing that is meant to happen is the only thing that could have happened. The only people who are meant to show up are the people who are in the room. So thank you all for that. And in that spirit, we have a song that we would like to bring forward as Grandmother Danima was talking, Rob reached over and he was like, "We should drum." And I'm like, ah. And then he said, "If you feel moved." I'm like, yes, 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 I feel moved. So thank you so much for bringing this song to us in this space. Oh, thank you so much. I'll be back in a second. Just had to double check something. So we now have the great honor to invite Elder May Louise, who's going to come up and some reflections. Elder May Louise is one of the founding grandmothers from Clan Mothers Healing Village. I had the deep honor of crossing paths with Elder May for many, many years in community in one way, shape, or form, her and Elder Jules and lots of other folks. But then for a couple of years, I was incredibly humbled and honored to work alongside Elder May at the School of Indigenous Education at Red River College when she was one of the elders in residence, and I was one of the staff who worked alongside her. And just an incredible human being. But I will allow Elder May to come and share her wisdom and introduce herself. So Elder May, thank you very much.
I get a little nervous when I have to come up and speak these days. I think it's because I'm aging. Thank you so much for inviting me. Do I need to? This particular topic that I've chosen today is very important to my heart and to my spirit and to what the work that Clan Mothers is doing. I'm from the Métis community, Red River Métis settler, and I have a spirit name, and in the language of my people, which is Ojibwe. I have lost my language, but in my with the Ojibwe language, it's Ishkitek, and it translates in Fire Heart Woman, and my clan is a Turtle Clan. And I've been around a long time. I was born in a little community way up in northern Manitoba that most people don't know. It was called Kississing Lake or Cold Lake. And there weren't too many people. I would think maybe 300 or something like that I lived there all my life till I was 16. And I'm the only one left of my clan, and I'm from the Campbell clan. When I was born 90 years ago, my mother named me May Louise Therese Campbell. And that's where I lived all my life till the day I got married. My people trapped and fished for a living, and spent lots of time out at the trap lines with my sisters and brothers. I'm the youngest and the only one left. And in those days, you got married very young. I had some sisters that were married when they were 14, would you believe? They're just children. I was 16 when I got married, and I stayed in that marriage for 30 years. And in those days, you have to remember what happened to the people, even the Métis people. They brought alcohol. They brought alcohol to our people. It was the worst, horrible, poisonous thing they could ever have done. And that destroyed families, destroyed our men. And it caused them to be mean and brutal and beat their wives and their women. And my mother was one of those women. And she stayed in that marriage for all those years as well. It was just like he had said, women were devalued. And there was a time in our world, we know, clan mothers have been doing a lot of research, when women were the power of the community. The grandmothers held the power, and the grandmothers were the leaders and the teachers and the medicine people. They were everything to the people. And now they took their power away. And so we live with that. We see it to this very day, just like you so eloquently told the story. And that story is true. And it's so nice to recognize and to realize that the men are beginning to understand the story. It's good to understand it, and it's good to hear it. But it has to be more than that. There has to be action. To our own men. Many years ago, I started out in St. Laurent, Manitoba. Myself and my daughter bought 40 acres of land, and I always believed that it was the spirit of the grandmothers that led me to do and to be what I am still doing today at 90. And they said, gather the women. And so we started gathering the women. I wasn't sure what I was doing. I just knew I had to do that. So women came. The women came, and that goes back now for almost 45, 50 years ago when I did that first. It was called Grandmother Moon Lodge. And the women came from across Canada, from up north. And I began to listen to their stories. We told our stories, and we cried together, and we laughed together. And I heard the stories. All the stories were the same. Abuse, not knowing your culture, being separated from that. I think the worst thing that all that happened was with Indigenous peoples. We have to recognize that we lost everything. It wasn't everything. We lost our land, we lost our children, we lost our languages, we lost our way of life. We even had our names changed in many instances, those who were in residential school. We lost everything. And so now here we are trying to reopen and reawaken the truth of who we are. The truth. So what's the truth? The truth is, when the women are out there beating their drums and marching on the streets at least 5 times a year now in Winnipeg, what are we praying for? Stop. Stop the abuse. Stop the abuse. Stop the abuse. And I remember starting one many years ago. It was called Grandmothers Speaking the Voice for Their Children. and that has faded away now, and there's red dress day, there's orange shirt day, there's all these days where we're out there, stop. And I thought, gee, we're getting tired. The women are getting tired because, first of all, has it changed? All of you sitting out there that work in all the areas that you work in, have you seen it change? Have you seen less of that happening? No, we haven't seen a change. I know I'm getting tired of drumming and saying stop. Where is the action, and where does the action have to come from? We sold Grandmother Moon Lodge and came to the city, and the women were phoning me, and they said, "May Louise, we have no place to go anymore. There's no place for women to gather and to pray and share our stories anymore." So the vision came to myself and my daughter. We have to do something different before I leave this earth, and we started another organization. It's called the Clan Mothers Healing and Educational Village. And we've been working very hard at making that happen, and it is happening. All those years that they were coming to grandmothers, say, what we have to do, I know very little. What I do know is their stories. They became my teachers. And what they are teaching me is, I don't know who I am anymore. I have lost contact with our traditional ways. And I want to thank the grandmother that spoke about those ways, because that's who we are. We are that. We are people that are connected to the Earth Mother, and she is part of us. I often say that women's roots go down deep into the Earth Mother. That's who we are, and it gives us that power. But it was taken away, so now how do we reclaim that? How do we do that? That's our challenge. We know how. We know how. But many of the organizations and places out there and the funding that we receive only is so difficult. You know, there's so many of us trying to do the right thing, and we're all fighting over the same money, which is not very much. I know at Clan Mothers, I feel so blessed because we were given as a gift from the Catholic Church 130 acres of land at Bel Air, because they knew and supported the Clan Mothers' idea and vision of how do we help our women. So we've been working at that for a long time, and I'm so proud, because you see, the only way it works is there has to be long-term healing. There's too many organizations out there who give money, and it's all short-term. You know, this is only a 6-month program, so after that you have these women for 6 months, and sorry, our funding has run out. And where do they go? So that doesn't work, we know. I'm 90 years old. The healing never ends. I still am challenged every day of my life. I still have a granddaughter on the street. I lost my firstborn grandson 3 years ago to an overdose of drugs. It happens to us all the time. It's never ending. So what do we have to do to stop it? We have some answers. We know the things that have to be done. We have to reawaken the true spirit of our women. And it can't be done on short term. I want to give you just an example, because now we have the proof. At Clan Mothers, we have 12 women, okay, that were on the streets. Some of them were in jail. Some of them had their children taken away. We took them to the circle of truth with Clan Mothers. We worked with them. We became family. We valued them. And we graduated 13 women who are now carpenters, are working out at the village, building the village. We did that in 2 years. And what's different about it? And so we will continue to do that. It's so beautiful to hear these women. We had a group of 25 nuns wanted to come out to Grandmothers 2 weeks ago. They came out, and they were the ones who gave us the land. And they said, "This is good. Let's look at the land and see what we've done." So we've built 3 buildings already, and we've got about 6 cottages happening. I think right now for the women to come and stay as long as they want to. It becomes their home. It's a village. It's not an agency, an organization, or anything like that. It is a village. And they looked at this and they were so impressed. So now they're trying to get some more money for us so we can continue to build the cabins and finish them. And we know we will be out there this summer for sure. We've started things that maybe haven't been done before. We have a women's moon dance happening every year, this year coming up in August, because you see women should be dancing under Grandmother Moon. That's where your power comes from, all of you. Your power comes from Grandmother Moon. So we have a 4-day event where women dance under Grandmother Moon. It's so beautiful to see and so beautiful to watch. To hear their stories. They're the ones who, when the nuns were there, they told their stories, how Grandmothers helped them, that they've been to so many other ways of help, and it just wasn't happening because we embrace them. We become family. And we're always there for them. But we do it because of the ceremony and the love and the value. They have to be valued. Some of them are Two-Spirit women. Some of them just got their children back as well. So a lot of good things are happening if we have to create an environment of an energy that is love and support and a family. So when they come to Grandmothers, the whole idea is to create social enterprise so we can become self-reliant. And somehow the government doesn't believe that. We didn't get any funding for them, which I'm very disappointed about. But the whole idea is for them to create, we have our first social enterprise. We have a carpentry group of 6 women, and they name themselves, and they're called Mother Earth Carpentry Group. And we're so proud of them. They're out now working in the city. So we know what to do. We know we just need the support and the help. And so I want to just get back to what this event is all about. Since I've been an elder at Red River College, I've been there those years, and I was also at Mount Carmel Clinic for 6 years now, and we work with our people, of course, are surrounded by Indigenous people at Mount Carmel. So they're coming in to talk to the elders, of course, and I've had several young men come to me recently, and they said to me, "We need to hear the teachings from the grandmothers." That's what they said. How does that happen? So I've been very passionate about this for a few years already, and I'm so happy to see what you're doing. And we actually are going to start a men's group at Grandmothers. We'll let you know when that is, and when it's going to start in January sometimes, because they asked for teachings from the grandmothers, and that's what we're going to provide for them. We have 6 grandmothers at Grandmothers that work when we need them. They're there for us. So what do the men need to know? They know how to be with women in a good way. And they're missing that spiritual essence of who they are. You hear us say and sing that women are sacred. You hear us say women are sacred and our children are sacred. Well, our men are sacred too. They're very sacred. But they have also been separated from their true spirit. And so they need to be talking to the spirit of who they really are. They have to know what that is. So grandmothers can teach them. The grandmothers can teach them that. I'm going to be really brave and tell you the first. One of the elders that I worked with for many years is Jules, of course, who we have lost. And he was having a men's group at his place at Willow. What was it, Red Willow Lodge? Yeah, I think so. And so he had the men's group there, and he said, "I want some grandmothers to come and sit with the men and tell their stories." And so we agreed. There were about 5 of us there. And so they were all men, and they were all ages from young to older men. And they said, what does a woman need from her husband, was what the question was. So we all worked very hard at thinking about what we need from our husbands, to be support, to be loved, to be heard, to know that we have our own power and our own thoughts and our own visions, and to respect that and honor that. So the women went on and on and on. It was just beautiful. And and then it was over, and one of the men got up and he put his hand up. I have a question, grandmother. And this was his question. Tell me, grandmothers, what is the difference between love and sex? That was the question. So we all sat there. We didn't know what to say. And I put up my hand. I said, I'm going to answer that question for you. And I said, I was married to the same man. He was a French man, actually from Quebec, for 30 long years. And for 30 years, I said, I was sexually abused. Because a man is married to a woman and have a license, he does not own her body. And I said, and it has nothing to do with love. Because if a man truly loved his woman, he would never hurt her or harm her. He would listen to her, and he would provide what he needed to provide. At one time, our men were warriors, and they were warriors to provide and protect. That was their job, to provide the needs of women and to protect them from never, ever being harmed. So something has happened to the spirits of men, and I think they have to maybe take that inner. Our elders often say the longest journey you will ever take in your life is the journey within yourself, is the journey within yourself. Sometimes we allow all the messages that are out there to enter our minds, and we begin to act in those actions that don't belong to us. There's a little part of you, and we call it your spirit, that tells you, and you get that feeling every once in a while, I'm so sorry I did that, or I shouldn't be here, or I shouldn't have done that, or I shouldn't have said that. That's your spirit talking to you. So you have to take a moment and start to listen to the true spirit of who you are, because that's who you are. We are all people who love and respect and honor each other. That's what we're all about. And the world has changed to not a good place, like the elder spoke earlier. We're not in a good place right now, because we have our own prophecies, and it says whatever happens to the earth mother will happen to the children of the earth. And that's what we're seeing now. So we need the men. We need you. We need men to gather and say, stop this. We can't do it. So the drumming and the singing and saying stop is not working, because it's not our responsibility as women. It's your responsibility as men to have the courage. If it has something to do with fear, then figure out what the fear is. It's the men who should be marching and saying, stop the abuse, because that's your responsibility. It's not ours. So my prayer is about that there are men starting to have gatherings already. They've come to me. There's a few of them who have tried to start a gathering, but there's some fear. It's you who has to figure out what that is, that is afraid to start marching and to challenge each other. Don't challenge the women. We've been trying to challenge the men for so long already. We're tired now, so it's your turn. It's your turn now. Your turn to challenge each other. And then, only then, will there be change. Only then will there be change, because we have to work together, not against each other, and love and support each other. And so at Clan Mothers, we're trying very hard to bring our women on board, and they will be the next generation that will control Clan Mothers Village. They have to see it finished, because we've got a lot more buildings to put up. And they are the ones who will create social enterprises, so we don't have to depend on government money all the time. So that's our dream and our vision. And please come out and visit us at Clan Mothers. during the summer months. It's beautiful. We even have a beach. We have a beachfront. It's beautiful. 130 acres, so we've got room for a lot of buildings. So regrets for listening to me, and my hope is that we could come to work together and make Winnipeg the first place that's going to do that. That's what I'd like to see. Thank you.
Here we go. Thank you so very much. I was at a gathering 2 weeks ago with people from the Manitoba construction industry, Heavy Sector Council, and there were folks there. And there were some of us in the room who were in rooms 20 years ago talking about exactly the same issues. And we had a little moment of pulling our hair out, figuratively and literally, of like we're still having the same conversation. So thank you for that call. And that call to action was really what was the kernel that drove the Intergovernmental Working Group for this year, was we wanted some action-orientated discussion. And one of the key things is that bringing men into this conversation for a safer tomorrow is for them as well. Because every single guy I know has at some point in his life been teased or bullied, and he's been teased and bullied with the language of sexism. He's been called a girl. He's been called a sissy. The worst thing you can do in Western European culture is to tell a man that he's acting like a woman, to assign him feminine traits, feminine characteristics. And the flip side, the worst thing you can do to a woman is accuse her of being a man, right? You know, and we all know that language there. So that was part of the nucleus of what we wanted to bring together today's panel. So we're going to invite our panelists to come up to the stage right now, for those of you who can. And I'm going to introduce Levi. So Levi Foy, for those of you who know him in the room, he doesn't need an introduction, but apparently he does. So here it goes. It is my honor, it is actually, to introduce Levi to you all. He is the executive director of Sunshine House and is a proud member of the Cwachicin First Nation. He first became involved with Sunshine House in 2014 as a part of the mapping project and quickly emerged as a key leader and serving as one of the founding members and coordinator of Like That at Sunshine House, which is an insanely great program. His extensive professional background, child welfare, homelessness research, and administration, all ground in a strong commitment to community organizing informed by Anishinaabe philosophies and practices. As the executive director, Levi has shown boundless creativity and unwavering vision and energy for his organization and his team. Levi leads from the heart and is a force of nature. Whether Levi is there for community, there for the artist community, he builds authentic and meaningful relationships. He inspires and strengthens organizations, and his passion and his dedication to the values of community and to authenticity and to individuals being seen makes him an incredibly invaluable leader and someone who I am deeply honored to count as a community colleague, but also as a friend. So thank you very much. Levi.
Thank you, Bradley. Oh, wow, that's loud. So before I call the panelists up, you're supposed to go to the back and get your mics. So just head over to the nice gentleman in the black cap there and black outfit and grab your mics. And then once you have your mic, give me a wave and then I'll introduce you. I also just want to acknowledge the elders who spoke this morning, Elder Denema and Elder May Louise, and for sharing those stories and also reminding us of the powerful gifts and the responsibilities that each one of us have in upholding and maintaining kind of good balance in this world. All right, so the first panelist that I'm going to introduce, because she has a microphone and I see it, is someone else who needs no introduction. Many of you may know her from her incredible work around MMIWG2S plus advocacy. She's a family member, she's a survivor of gender-based violence, and she is a strong and fearless advocate for unsheltered people in the city and in the territories of Manitoba. Everyone, I'd like to introduce Isabel Daniels. Sit wherever you want. There's no real... Oh, except there. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I'm going to go to the end anyways, because I think the camera's right there, so then I won't be on there. Next, I'm going to introduce... I'll introduce one of my dear friends. Karen Sharma is a first-generation South Asian living in Winnipeg Treaty 1 territory. Karen is currently the Executive Director of the Manitoba Human Rights Commission, where she has worked for the past 9 years. As the Commission's Executive Director, Karen's job to lead promotion and protection of human rights in the development of policy and research and the delivery of human rights education. Prior to assuming this role, Karen worked with the Commission as the Director of Investigations and Policy, as well as the Government of Manitoba as the Director of Labour Market and Strategic Initiatives for Manitoba Labour and Immigration, and the manager of the Secretariat to the Forum of Labour Market Ministers Working Group on International Qualifications Recognition. I should have got some water before I started yours. In addition to her work with the Commission, Karen organized Queer People of Color Winnipeg, a collective that created programming that centered and celebrated Two-Spirit, queer, and trans, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Karen is the past chair of the Board of Directors for the Women's Health Clinic, and she currently serves as on the Board of Directors of the Manitoba Council of Administrative Tribunals and is the chairperson, thank you, of the Canadian Association of Statutory Human Rights Agencies. Everyone, welcome Karen. I will warn you that I will bully Karen because I know her, and that is the basis of our relationship. What not to do. Do as I say, not as I do. I'm going to introduce our next panelist. Punjabi Community Health Services is a not-for-profit organization that provides culturally relevant support to South Asian communities in areas such as mental health, healthcare, community engagement, and justice. One of the organization's key focuses is to address the unique challenges faced by individuals experiencing gender bias, intimate partner violence, and other forms of gender inequality. PCHS Manitoba works to create pathways for South Asian women, men, and families to access resources, services, and advocacy that respect their cultural needs while addressing systemic issues that can limit their opportunities for safety, healing, and empowerment. Ronnie Dhaliwal, social worker, is an inaugural member of the board for PCHS Manitoba. He is also the system navigator and outreach support worker, and since October 2023 has been supporting diverse communities by providing culturally sensitive care and helping them connect with available resources. Ronnie Dhaliwal has been actively involved in supporting individuals affected by intimate partner violence, offering counseling and system navigation support for those in need. He has provided direct support to individuals, couples, and families, helping them navigate complex systems and access resources necessary for safety and healing. Through his work in this area, he is engaged in the community through awareness, campaigns, educational initiatives, and bringing attention to critical issues such as gender inequality and intimate partner violence within the South Asian community. In addition to his work providing direct support, Ronnie has been instrumental in building relationships with local health and wellness and justice providers. His efforts have helped strengthen PCHS's Manitoba's capacity to advocate for the needs of individuals impacted by gender violence and IPV, ensuring that these voices are heard and that the services provided are culturally appropriate and effective. Welcome, Ronnie. Thank you. And our fourth panelist this afternoon is Hannah Stoltz, who leads the Empower Men project and has a degree in social work and nonprofit management. The Empower Men project is a part of Mama Wachita Center's is part of the Mama Wachita Center, an Indigenous-led organization in Manitoba, in Winnipeg, and we engage men and boys to prevent sexual exploitation and sex trafficking. Men create the most of the demand for exploitation, yet very little attention is paid to and focused on this group. Hennis has worked in different positions in the mental health field, child welfare, and criminal justice. He is passionate about men taking a greater part in creating safer communities for women and girls. He regularly presents at trainings for law enforcement, social services, and educators in human trafficking, sexual exploitation, sex buyers, and the harm they cause. That is Hennis, our fourth panelist this morning or this afternoon. Oh, you're gonna make me sit right in the middle. that's homophobic. All right, so everyone has been provided the questions in advance. I think panelists, what I'm gonna do for the sake of time, because we have 5 questions, and it's probably gonna get disruptive once lunch is served here in about 15 minutes. And I know that a couple of the panelists have requested some time for questions from the audience, and so I want to respect that wish as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to merge question 2 and 3 so that we can ask question 5 given the nature of the room, if that makes sense for you. We're in agreement? Great. Okay. I'm going to come sandwich myself in there in 1 second. Thank you, but I'm going to gather my stuff first too. So panelists, and in no particular order, unless you need me to give you an order, I will. Could each of you share your personal and professional experience related to helping to eradicate gender-based violence, for example, empowering men, changing systems, etc. Feel free to reference, our current realities or the realities in which you work and the rates of gender-based violence specifically in Manitoba. Take it away.
Good morning or afternoon now. As he said, my name is Isabel Daniels, and I am biracial. My mom is from Saugeen First Nation, and my dad is Jamaican. I always just want to do a brief just acknowledgement to my cookums and my grandmothers. My great-grandma was a slave on a plantation farm in Louisiana, and my great-grandma was relocated when they made the U.S.-Canada border, who I'm named after. Her name is Isabel Daniels, the original Isabel Daniels, and she originally was from Roseau, Minnesota. So when they made that border, they displaced her to Stonewall, Manitoba, where she met my grandpa, who was another displaced individual, and then they were relocated again to Saugeen First Nation. My personal experience with gender-based violence, I am a survivor of childhood sexual exploitation. I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. I'm a survivor of domestic violence. A survivor of adulthood exploitation as well. And all these experiences that I've gone through in my younger life led me to not only seeing the brutal reality of how non-Indigenous men view us as Indigenous women. And when I got better, when I did my own work on my own self to get educated, to leave that life, I became a mother. I wanted my kids to, I wanted to be able to be a mom to empower my children. Because of the history in my family, those teachings weren't handed down to me because my mom also grew up in violence. My grandma was a residential school survivor, so there was a lot of colonialism in my upbringing. And it was up to me to change that narrative for my family. I'm a mother of 3 daughters, and it was really important to me to make sure that my daughters had self-worth, self-respect, and had strong voices for themselves. I started doing advocacy work for MMIW when I lost a few of my family members and my best friend. But I felt after going through domestic violence and this person has gone on to assault and be charged with other victims. So he's got more victims and he's got more convictions of domestic violence. And I found that in the justice system, there was no place for these men to get the proper healing for their views and the way that they were treating women. There's nothing with probation services. So I think that we need to have better supports and services for our men in order to have access to learning about where they come from, shedding negative stereotypes. So I started doing gatherings for Indigenous men, for the families of murdered and missing Indigenous men and boys as well. And I found through there that a lot of them didn't have any other viewpoint of our women than what was handed down to them through a colonial lens. So as of now, I try to educate people on providing supports and services to our men to make sure that that they're included in the conversations of women's issues, and to find a way for them to create supports for themselves as well.
Thank you very much. Thanks for sharing deeply personal information as well.
I'm just going to move the podium.
That'd be great, because I can see Alea kind of. Like, hi, Alea. Anybody else?
I can go next. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Thank you for the invitation, first of all. And I wanted to start my remarks with thanking all of the survivors of domestic violence or intimate partner violence and sexual exploitation and trafficking. I know there's a number of you here. I want to thank you for who you are and also for the leadership. And I think especially, as was mentioned already by Elder May Louise as well as Elder Denema, a lot of the work has been led by women in this field. And I just wanted to honor you for that work and for everybody for doing this work and taking the leadership. So I also want to share a little bit about my own personal story. So I'm an immigrant. I came here in my early 20s to Canada and was going into social work a number of years ago. And for about 10 years have been working in the field of domestic violence, intimate partner violence, sexual exploitation and trafficking. For about 7 years, I led a project or a program with an organization with men who had been charged for domestic violence and being involved in exploitation on the buyer's side, the buyers. And that's the background that I came from, and it was not something that I really chose to do, but I think that I felt was going into it because I realized how much of an issue it is, how many families are impacted by domestic violence, by intimate partner violence, including sexual exploitation, sexual abuse, sexual harassment. And doing that work really highlighted, I think, the need to focus on men as well, because I feel that men have a large responsibility for committing most of the violence or most of the harm, and yet I think we are not focused enough on how men can do better, and that's the background that I come from. I work for the Mama Wichita Center, and this is an interesting combination, and I feel very honored to work for an Indigenous organization as a non-Indigenous person, and I feel that there's a great sense of trust put into me, and I always try to live up to that trust and to that respect that has been given to me, and trying in some ways to do my part around these kinds of things as well. So the background that I share my experiences from comes from that work that I've been doing directly with men. Yeah, just very excited about these conversations and the title of this panel, because I believe that if we want to really make a difference, and for those of you who have been in this work very long, you might think, well, we had those conversations already, and I think it's good if we continue to do that and particularly engage men, not only those who perpetrate violence, but also other men who are in leadership positions as well. And so that's why I'm very excited that there's different departments here represented, both from the province, from the city. I think men can do a lot better, even men who may not perpetrate any kind of violence, but who are in leadership positions to make a difference in that regard.
Hi, my name is, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Hi, my name is Roni Dhaliwal. Thank you so much for having Punjabi Community Health Services be a part of this event. When I got these questions given to me on Friday, I did some deep thinking about like intimate partner violence and gender-based violence that I've been able to witness throughout my life, and I was quite fortunate that I didn't live in a household where gender-based violence or intimate partner violence occurred, and I was very gracious for the fact that I grew up in a very socially progressive family, for the fact that when I was growing up, my dad was part of this organization called Punjabi Literary and Cultural Association, and a big part of the work that the organization was doing was educating people or men and women within the community about the importance of having egalitarian relationships. And I think one of the things that they always focused on was the economic realities or how our economic system bleeds into our domestic situations. And I was quite fortunate that I had the opportunity to grow up in that household. On the other hand, like I have been friends with people who have experienced intimate partner violence and gender-based violence, and the realities for them were quite sad, if I can. They were sad, and just seeing some of the hurt and the pain that some of the women that I have worked with that have experienced gender-based violence, it was very painful, and carrying that pain home with me, that was very very challenging. I kind of feel like I got vicarious trauma, and hearing some of the stories that some of the women that I've worked with and some of the stuff that they've experienced. As far as like professionally, in terms of eradicating gender-based violence, like I started off working in child and family services when I first graduated from social work back in 2008, and from there, after completing my master's in 2010, I ended up working for the Office of the Children's Advocate, and at the time they were doing a study on suicides, and part of my role at the Children's Advocate was to do child death reviews. Well, they called me a special investigator. And one thing that as they were doing their stats and the research studies, one of the common stats that kept coming up was that a lot of the suicides where children were dying within the child welfare system were directly related. They were almost finding a one-to-one correlation with witnessing intimate partner violence. And I don't think that I'm not sure if they've ever published that study, but that was some of the internal stats that were being published at the Office of Children's Advocate, which is known as the Manitoba Advocate for Children and Youth now. And as time has moved forward, I've gotten in, and once I got my job here with Punjabi Community Health Services, I would say the majority of the calls that I'm receiving in this role as a systems navigator and community outreach worker are involving domestic violence or gender-based violence. And one thing that I'm observing is like, I guess there's a little bit of naivety on my part, is that sexual abuse comes along with physical abuse and financial abuse and ritual abuse, and all the abuses are all related. And I'm hopeful that with some of the work that's being done in the broader community and taking some of this education back to the Punjabi community or the South Asian community, I'm hopeful that we can eradicate gender-based violence going forward.
Thank you. Okay, so my name is Karen Sharma. My pronouns are she, her, and maybe I'll talk to you a little bit about my professional experience and then slowly warm myself up to sharing things about myself personally. Levi was kind enough to mention that I work in an organization called the Manitoba Human Rights Commission. And I've been there for about 10 years, and most recently in the role of executive director. And if you don't know about our agency, we're an independent agency of the government of Manitoba, and our work is premised on a fundamental idea, which is that every person fundamentally has inherent dignity and worth. And so our work is in upholding that dignity and worth. And we do that by promoting human rights throughout the province of Manitoba, but we also administer a complaint system, which is how most people know about us, which is a legal process by which people can make complaints to us if they feel that they've experienced discrimination or harassment in places like the workplace, in accessing public services, in housing, et cetera. And so it's really in this role and in the past 10 years that I've had to come face to face in sort of a professional capacity with what gender-based violence and the crisis of gender-based violence in our province looks like. Just on October 31st, our Human Rights Tribunal in the province of Manitoba released a decision which touched exactly on this issue. It involved a complainant, a woman who was experiencing what initially started as verbal sexual harassment in the workplace and escalated to physical assault and culminated in threats against her. And this decision really reminds me that gender-based violence doesn't only occur in families and intimate partnerships. It occurs in workplaces, it occurs in every sort of domain of our society, between friends, between strangers, and in families and intimate partnerships. It's really no surprise to me that complaints alleging gender-based violence within our system are so prevalent because we know gender-based violence is pervasive. Stats, I was told to bring up some data, so I listened to those instructions. Stats Canada reports that women are 3 times more likely to experience unwanted sexual behaviors in public, 4 times more likely to have been sexually assaulted since the age of 15 as men, twice as likely to experience negative emotional consequences, which you raised, as a result of experiencing unwanted sexual behaviors compared to men. And women are significantly more likely to experience all forms of intimate partnership violence. Gender-based violence often intersects with other forms of oppression, which we certainly see in our office. And that really creates unique experiences and vulnerabilities targeting people at the intersections of many identities. Just 2 weeks ago, and I know this was acknowledged, we commemorated Transgender Day of Remembrance, a day that looks at and calls us to spend time thinking about the lives of trans people in our community who've been lost to transphobic violence. And if you've ever been to that event, and I've attended it a number of years, you'll hear the names of people who've been lost in our communities be called out. And I remember the first time I attended that event and I heard the names being called and I thought, oh my God, these are trans people of color. They're Black, Indigenous, trans folks, and they're in particular trans women of color, right? And so I think it calls upon us to think about the way that trans women of color are targets of gender-based violence, which is fueled by transphobia and racism, and the way in which trans women in our communities are failed by systems that devalue their humanity. But gender-based violence, and I talk now as a member of the 2S LGBTQ community who's done organizing in the community for a number of years, really focused on creating spaces for us, for 2S QT BIPOC, queer, trans people of color, to feel safe and celebrated within our community, because there are so few spaces like that for us. And often when we get together, it is about dancing, because dancing is one of the ways that you can shed the horrors of what it can sometimes feel like to encounter homophobia, transphobia, and its intersections with racism on a daily basis. But it's, and just acknowledging the unique gifts that 2S QT BIPOC bring to community. But it's really important to recognize that gender-based violence isn't only in those forms of violence that we acknowledge on days like the Transgender Day of Remembrance. transphobia, homophobia, biphobia, and other forms of oppression that 2SQT BIPOC, 2S LGBTQ folks experience are in and of themselves structural forms of gender-based violence that our communities have to encounter every day in their private lives, in their public lives, and are embedded in things like street harassment, intimate partner violence, sexual harassment, and then on top of that, the resources that exist in communities to support folks that are experiencing those kinds of forms of violence often don't speak to the 2S LGBTQIA community, and there's another kind of violence that comes about in trying to access those resources that are not necessarily safe and inclusive and recognizing of our kinds of relationships and partnerships and experiences in the world. Thinking through gender-based violence through an intersectional framework also brings us face to face with the disproportionate rates of gender-based violence for Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirited LGBTQIA plus peoples. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about the way in which gender-based violence is a tool and a system that upholds settler colonialism. And we'll talk more about that as today goes on. I just want to end by thinking a little bit about my own experience, I guess. I've talked a bit about being a queer person in this city, but I also am a person of Punjabi descent. My family immigrated to here in the 70s into Winnipeg, and that was a time where there weren't very many Punjabi families in Winnipeg. We were part of sort of a second wave of migration into the city. And so our community was really small, and you would often know the other Punjabi folks that were in Winnipeg. I feel like I recognize folks even in this room from growing up in the city at that time in the 80s. And the insularity of our community was another thing, I think, that created its own challenges in terms of gender-based violence. And I read a little while ago, I think it was last year, around the National Day of Action, the Canadian Museum for Human Rights had posted a really wonderful article, I recommend folks read it, about gender-based violence in rural and remote settings and the particularities of what gender-based violence looks like there when there are limited places of reporting, when the police officer lives and resides in your community, is integrated with all the other folks that live in that community, when there aren't confidential ways that you can report. And all of that so rang true for me in thinking about that insular, small way in which our community first arose in the province, and thinking about how being part of a small minority group brings about its own challenges in terms of being able to structure the right kinds of resources and supports for combating gender-based violence. And I think it made me quite emotional to hear about the Punjabi Cultural Health Services that you're working with, because I think the kinds of gender-based resources that we need within the Punjabi community, within South Asian communities, are particular and need to look at the very nuanced ways in which gender-based violence arises within our context. So maybe I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you so much. You did good. You got emotional. You opened up.
I called upon numbers.
You called upon numbers. It was just the most Karen response. It was perfect. So the next two questions are about unpacking internalized patriarchy and self-reflection for men regarding perpetration of gender-based violence. And so as I'm going to clunkily merge these two questions together, feel free to, if you're not comfortable speaking on something, you are also welcome to pass, and I should have told you that before. And also, I'm a terrible moderator. You have about 2 minutes per question we'll try to do so that we can answer all 5. But you all did really good. No, you all were within 2 minutes. It was great. And so I was like, okay, this sounds natural then. Men often internalize patriarchal beliefs, which impacts their behaviors and contributes to systems of oppression and perpetuates gender-based violence. The first kind of question of this: how can men unlearn harmful attitudes and practices, particularly those that have been ingrained from a young age? And then secondly, how can men within male and systems-dominated environments and workplaces start to use their power and privilege to disrupt that culture from the inside, where masculinity is not only accepted, but rewarded? And how does the normalization of masculinity in certain industries or social circles impact men's understanding of consent, boundaries, and respect? And I think a number of you have already kind of softly forayed into these two, so it feels natural. So feel free to jump in wherever you want. Or shall I pick? I'm picking? Okay, you're going then, right?
I think firstly, I think I found question 3 to be kind of a lot more challenging than question 2, and I'll explain why as I go forward. I think number 2 for me was when I was doing a lot of reflection over the weekend. When we're talking about internalizing patriarchal beliefs, I think it's more so just being able to question why we act the way we do when we're around other men, and why do we act the way we do when we're around women or people identifying as other genders. One thing that I kept thinking about even during the last couple of weeks was, even when I was at the gym, I was paying attention to some of the conversations that men were having with each other. And one of the conversations I heard two men asking each other was, this one guy was talking to his friend about how he had just broken up with his girlfriend, and I think he was trying to share like big feelings about like I'm really hurt, and I'm in pain. The response from his buddy was, "Eff it, get over it. She's nothing. She's just a beep," and that was the attitude. And the one guy goes, "Yeah, I know, but I think you want to share more, but because of the idea of being masculine is you just get over things and you just go out and find another person is how he was being socialized." And in that moment, I felt like maybe I should go over and show him compassion, but then I also kind of backed off, because I don't know the person. He might think that there's always this connotation that if you go into your feelings, the guys call you, like, they'll say like homophobic things to you. So there is the thought that if I went over to him, I could be accused of being homosexual or being gay, and so I backed off. I didn't engage in that one either. And that was just one example. Another example occurred yesterday. I was in the steam room with after my workout, and one of the guys started speaking about how he likes Republican states better than Democrat states in the United States. And I was just asking him, like, what's the reason for that? He goes, there, you could go to massage parlors, and you get like, there's not as many rules, and there you could actually exploit women the way you want to use them. And I just thought that was kind of odd. Like, so your reasons for your political affiliation is due to the fact that you just want to be able to use people. And yeah, that was just a couple of gym conversations that I picked up with men having between men. I also think that generally speaking, we're talking about like patriarchy. I think men themselves are kind of like oppressed with patriarchy. Like, we're taught at a very young age not to share our feelings, not to talk about what is going on within us, or talk about what we're experiencing. What we're pretty much taught is suck it up, toughen up, and move on. And that's kind of the attitude like I was brought up with a lot growing up, until I discovered my feelings, which I thought was very liberating. And and now living in my feelings and being able to talk about what it is that I'm actually experiencing when I'm having a big emotional moment has been very liberating, for the fact that I can talk about myself, and I'm not as repressed. And I think a lot of guys are also taught just to use a lot of like substances, and I think this is where substance use comes into play as well too, because men are not taught to really share what's going on within them. And I also think that we're also taught to be in control, and so if our intimate partner or if another person from a different gender is not like complying with us, we start using more force or start becoming like more dominant in that sense as well. And I think that the idea of like, when I saw this reference of upstander versus bystander, I think it's very challenging to really step into a place to be an upstander. And I'll use like a workplace example from my previous workplace. There was a manager there that used to go around, and he used to be kind of flirty with all the women and whatnot. And One time I was talking to my supervisor in her office, and this manager from another program just walked into this office, and I was in a female-dominated organization. He walked in the office, and he just started massaging her shoulders in front of me, without asking for her permission, and I felt really uncomfortable. I didn't know how to act because I'm thinking like, do I say something? She was in a position of power over me, so I was said, if she's not saying anything, what am I gonna do? I'm her underling, and I just kind of I felt so like almost emasculated in that situation because I couldn't even tell him like, hey, that's wrong, because you're also thinking about your own employment and whatnot at that moment. And yeah, I just ended up, I guess, tucking my tail and walking out of that room. I just didn't know how to react. And I know the question here was about how to do it in male-dominated industries. But I've been predominantly in a female-dominated industry, and even then I didn't have the ability to speak up. And yeah, that's where I'm gonna end my spiel, and I'll pass on to somebody else.
Okay, I'll go.
Thank you.
I just want to start with a teaching that I got. We were doing a gathering for the families of murdered and missing Indigenous men and boys, and one of the elders, one of the moms had lost her son, and she was mentioning that her son didn't get a lot of support because he had some domestic violence charges. So when he was taken, there wasn't a lot of support for her and her family due to his life choices. And so this elder stood up and she said, you know, my cookum encouraged me to stay in this relationship for 30 years. And in this relationship, my partner was abusive, very physically abusive to me. And it was our tradition, it was our belief that once you marry someone, you stay in that marriage and you have to keep your family together regardless. Oh, it'll pass. He'll be nice again, things like that. And when her cookum had passed away, her grandpa was still alive. And her grandpa said to her, you leave that man right now. I never said anything when your cookum was alive, but I'm telling you right now that you need to leave this relationship. You'll have a healthier family and you'll have a healthier life. And she said, well, why didn't you say anything all these years ago? Or all these years had gone by. And he said, well, you know, I just, you know how your cookum could be. But now that she's gone, I don't want you to live in this. And the reason why I'm saying this is because some of the things that we're brought up with are not right, and they're not the reality, and they do nothing for us as a people. Some of the teachings and things that are passed down from our grandparents and our parents aren't relevant, or it's not even our stuff to carry. That's somebody else's BS. And so I feel a lot of us go into life and we carry on somebody else's BS. We carry on things that don't even internally make us feel good. And we don't even really know why we're doing this. We know that the intention and abusing another person doesn't make us feel any better inside. And I think that a lot of us as people, as men, as we all have to realize that what we carry isn't ours to carry any longer. And if we really want to make systematic change, we have to leave those old ways in the past where they belong. Make that a part of how things used to be and not how things are. I also believe that men have to have conversations about how this toxic masculinity really doesn't make you more of a man. It makes you somebody to be feared. It makes you somebody that, you know, people don't really want to be around. People are whispering around, you know, and you also have to call out people that are abusing women. I see a lot of times, even in, you know, Indigenous country, that we're not saying anything about people who we know are abusing other people, who are sexually assaulting women, who are sexually assaulting gender diverse people. We're still in this kind of, gray, not even gray area. We're just in a moment of like, how will this affect my life? And for me, I don't give a how it affects my life, if I'm gonna lose my job, if I'm gonna, like, these things I don't really think about in the moment of advocacy because I have daughters. And if we're not changing the mindset of men, then we're just ingraining another generation of abusive behavior. And I want my children to have healthy partners. I want men to be healthy. I want people to start realizing that all of these things long term do nothing but harm our communities. There's a ripple effect when women are violated. There's a ripple effect on their children, on our communities. All of that goes into generational trauma and other things that don't belong to us. And how would you feel if you were violated in that way? If men had to, if the role was reversed, how would you want to be treated? Would that be okay for yourself as a person to go through that kind of behavior, to be treated in that way, to be sexualized, to be dumbed down to an object? Would you feel okay? How would your life be if that's what your experience was? It wouldn't be very positive. You wouldn't have a good sense of self if every day you were a victim of violence in some way, shape, or form. So if you just close your eyes and envision what life would be like, and you humanize us as women, I think there's room for a kinder conversation.
Really good. Really powerful stuff. Karen or Ines?
Do you want to go next? Sure.
I just wanted to draw on a couple of things that you said, Isabel, because they really resonated with me. Because I've been trying to figure out why do I have or how have I come to the place that I am at in terms of how I understand gender. And I know for me it had to do with kind of like you were saying, like the way that masculinity was modeled to me by my father and my grandfather, who really rejected traditional expressions of masculinity and embraced emotion, and they embraced caregiving, and they sowed a seed for me, for my generation, and they sowed a seed also for the younger people in our family. And we are inheriting sort of these norms around gendered expression, and they're passed to us intergenerationally, and the change that we have to make around, because it is transformative change that we have to make around how we express gender, and that's across the board, like how we rigidly, confine ourselves to gendered expression, that is interconnected with like cis heteropatriarchy, right? But and racism. So how we are expressing gender, that is going to take intergenerational change too, by us sowing seeds. And I was lucky enough to have had the elders in my family sow that seed for me, so that I could grow up and feel proud to be a queer person, and be proud to feel also very fluid in how I express myself in a gendered way. And I have a queer nephew who does drag and is celebrated in our family for his expression. And it wouldn't have been but for, the man in my family saying, we're gonna do this differently. Like, I'm gonna cook for this family. I'm gonna be here to take care of my family emotionally when we encounter difficult circumstances. So I think it's about having a long view, I guess, of what this change will look like in terms of undoing the harms of patriarchy and internalized patriarchy. And I think it will be also about embracing queer people, quite frankly, the queer and trans people in our lives, because I have also learned much of what I know around challenging gendered stereotypes by being in queer community and by having trans people model to me like the fierce courage and strength of really saying gender is a spectrum, and and we can exist and express this in ways that are transformative. And I think it's been the labor of trans folks in our community that is really changing a lot around how we understand gendered expression. And so those were some thoughts that were going through my mind as you were speaking about how we have to shed the things that no longer serve us and sow the seeds of the things that will blossom and give rise to just good ways of relating to each other in future.
My grandma always said that, and she was a diabetic, and I was like telling this story. So she would always like check our blood sugar with that little thing. And she raised 15 of her own kids and then 19 of her grandkids. So we were always there. And so she'd call me Zub. She'd be like, Zub. She'd prick my finger and check my blood sugar. She's like, we as women don't have the option to be weak. It's not afforded to us, especially us as brown women. We don't have that. Us as, back then, we still said Indian, us as Indian women don't have that option. And that really carried me through, and I still use that teaching when things are one-sided in gender issues and diverse issues and stuff like that. And when facing patriarchy and stuff like that, I really hold on to that because she was the first nurse for Saugeen First Nation, and she was very innovative for healthcare for Indigenous people. And being a residential school survivor, having all that violence in her life, she was one of the most kindest people, the most giving people, and I really hold on to that because if she can fight through all that back then when there was a lot less in terms of support, then yeah.
Thank you.
I want to dovetail to what you had said earlier, Ronnie, and even some of the other remarks. I think we really have a crisis of masculinity in some ways, and I think unless we start to unpack some of those forces that are behind it, that are portraying values of who a man has to be, right? Like you have to be strong, you have to be powerful, and you have to be in control. And some of those things are not necessarily bad in and of themselves. Like there's nothing wrong with being strong, right? And wanting to get things done. I think the problem comes in when you see it as a sort of a man box, that you have to fulfill a certain role that is subscribed to you through the messages from your upbringing, from the media that you watch, from the messages that you get. And if you're not allowed to go outside of that box, then you're called something else, right? Like those homophobic remarks that you were mentioning, right? Like if you're in touch with your feelings, if you cry, if you are vulnerable, those are generally not associated with masculinity, right? And if you portray that as a man, then you're seen as less than, right? And I think a lot of men don't want to go there, right? They might feel sort of weak and vulnerable inside. I certainly feel like that. I felt like that before coming up to the panel because I'm nervous about this stuff, right? Even though I've done it a number of times. But I think as men, we have to understand that it doesn't make you less of a man just because you are showing a level of emotion or that you're showing something that you feel is feminine and not for you. And I think the problem is then as well that we posture sometimes as men in terms of gaining respect from other men, right? And it's by trying to domineer, whether it's domineering other men or women or gender diverse folks as well. And I think that's part of the problem, and I think it harms the others, but I think it harms men as well, because I think deep down inside a lot of men want good relationships with their partners. They want good relationships with their children, or they seek intimacy, love, and connection. But I think they go about it in a way that they've been taught that is sort of I take what I want rather than this is we work this out mutually in a relationship, whether it comes to on a sexual basis. And I think the crisis of sexual abuse and sexual assault and sexual exploitation, I think, is evident in that regard. And so, how do we undo that? I think we have to start looking at how we raise girls, how we raise boys, gender diverse folks. I have 3 boys that I'm raising together with my wife, and I want them to be mindful of their emotions. My youngest son, he's 9, he loves to come and cuddle with me in the morning. I want him to understand that this is all good. I think part of what we have to start doing is we have to really talk with young people earlier in the schools, in youth agencies. The stats that you reference and even that I found is teen dating violence has gone up significantly over the last number of years, particularly for boys as perpetrators. And I think the influence of social media and those kinds of things is so strong these days that we have to get ahead of this way earlier. Why do we not have workshops in schools talking about these? Everybody who goes through schools will be in a relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship or other relationships. Why do we not teach about that? Why do we not make it mandatory, train the teachers or the educators on that, and have conversations around what does a healthy relationship look like? And I think a lot of kids, like the workshops that we run, for example, in some of the schools, some of the kids say, well, I didn't even know that this was part of an unhealthy relationships, being constantly controlled or somebody constantly calling you and wanting to know where you are and those kinds of things. Why do we not do that? So that would be a practical suggestion from my side is let's talk about that. And I think the other part that was mentioned earlier, I think it really harms boys as well, because I think boys are sort of confused about all of this. They listen to Andrew Tate, for example, and like this strong masculine and don't ever let any woman disrespect you kind of mentality. And if we don't have anything to counter that, I think it's harmful for them as well. It might lead to them being sort of respected in the short term, but I think in the end, I don't think it's good, because it harms their relationships, whether it's with their peers or with an intimate partner. So I think that would be something from my perspective to focus on, and just I think to highlight the other thing as well. I think there's a mental health crisis for boys as well. For men, they have a higher suicide rate, and I don't think we should pit one against the other. But I think we have to see society and we as a community aren't very healthy. And when you look at the stats, everything that I found trends up. Sexual assault, sexual exploitation, domestic violence, it trends up. And it's concerning in some ways, So I think we have to do better, and we have to get ahead of the game here. And some of it, I think, has to be mandated in school, at least that you have to talk about these things and help people understand it. And maybe we'll come back to that in question 4 or 5, is what are other agencies or institutions doing, And I think it has to include a cultural shift around how we see men in that regard.
If I can just add to that, I would even say that when you talk about social media and social media presence, I would say that one of the biggest factors that's really affecting our masculinity is the pornography industry, right? There is like so much that's quick and easy. It's easy accessible. There is like a lot of men are learning ways to relate to women through pornography or through to other genders. I think that's been equally as harmful.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just looking for our time, and so we got about 10 minutes left on this on the actual allocation of time here, and lunch is being served. So I think what we'll do is we'll talk about questions 4 and 5, and then I think what we'll do is give each of you an opportunity to kind of wrap up your final thoughts for the panel. I don't want to miss these last 2 questions. I think they're very, very important, given the context of today and given the context of our daily lives here in Winnipeg. Considering the national crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirited people, There is an intersect of anti-Indigenous racism and gender-based violence. Many Indigenous girls and Two-Spirit and gender diverse people experience violence not only from individuals, but also from the state, whether through justice system or lack of support services. How can men help dismantle the structures of oppression and advocate for Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit and gender diverse people's rights for safety? How can men become better allies in a fight for the justice for missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit and gender diverse people? And how can men effectively conduct environmental and internal scans of harmful behaviors and address these to affect real change in support of Indigenous families and families of MMIWG2S+. Furthermore, working off of that, can you provide any kind of, we're in a room full of public servants, government officials, and different institutions. Can you provide some tangible policy changes, if you're not comfortable with the first part of the question, that need to be enacted to prevent further violence within our organizations and within systems? It's a lot. It is a lot of questions, and you each have 2 minutes to solve the world. So have at 'em. Finally, and then how do we, and what can men in positions of political influence do to ensure that MMIWG2S crisis becomes a key focus of national conversation and policy action? And I think these are all really, really important things to touch on. So touch on the one that's most salient with you, and then when we're wrapping up, you can, hopefully weave a beautiful tapestry here. Karen, I'm gonna pick on you.
I thought, don't make eye contact with Levi right now. But then I was making eye contact.
You're just staring at me too,
I
like
know.
this.
Thinking, break eye contact, break eye contact. I didn't. These are really significant areas for reflection. And so I'll touch upon question 5, which asks us, what can we be doing as public servants? What can we be doing in our various spheres of influence? Because so many of us have big responsibilities and play important roles in our systems. Let me pass that down. And I work in the justice system. Thank you. And I think about this question so much because I think it's no secret. I mean, StatsCan released some data earlier this year about attrition rates in the justice system around bringing forward charges and convictions around sexual assault, right? And how high the rates of attrition are, that cases do not move forward through the justice system when they deal with sexual assault. And of course, I don't work in the criminal system, I work in human rights, but I thought about that even in the context of the system where I work. I was dealing with a complaint a number of years ago that had to do with an employee that was experiencing homophobia in the workplace. And he kept reporting to his superiors, this is what's happening to me. And they kept not taking it seriously. And this went on for years where he was reporting what was happening. And it's because the people that he was reporting to didn't recognize that what he was experiencing was homophobia. They didn't understand the context of his experience, and they didn't know why what he was naming to them was harmful would be harmful. They, we can chalk that up to internalized homophobia, to a lack of knowledge and awareness. Maybe, of course, there's also malicious intent sometimes in cases too, but it brought to me that we all have work to do in our various systems to better educate ourselves around the pervasiveness and the expressions of what gender-based violence look like, in respect of our systems, because of course, justice officials are saying, well, there's not enough evidence to progress with those charges, or we couldn't, make that case out if we took it to hearing. But what are they understanding as evidence, and how are they, what are they valuing through those systems? And so I think there's a lot of critical reflection that needs to happen in terms of how we are taking seriously gender-based violence. I think you brought up this really important point around consent education. And we think about how education around consent needs to happen in schools with young people, which is absolutely critical, and it needs to happen in way more robust ways than we're hearing about it now. and kids are experiencing it now. But it needs to happen kind of everywhere, because I think we need reminders at all stages in our lives and in all places of our lives of what consent looks like and means in respect of where we are in our lives. So those are a few things I would say about, like, we can be, that is lifelong learning and praxis, and so we should be importing that and bringing that into our workplaces. And when we're talking about our harassment and our respectful workplace policies, we should be talking about and like empowering people to think about concepts of consent, and challenging gender-based violence in all of its expressions, even there, right? And bring that into all facets. And then the earlier question was around the calls to justice around murdered and missing Indigenous women, and the responsibility we all hold in that work. And I will say that this is particularly hard for me, and I'm going to speak as a Punjabi person, right, in understanding that there is a lot of work that needs to happen specifically in the South Asian community to be honest and reflective and action-oriented about the violence that is happening in respect of Indigenous women and girls and two-spirited and queer relatives. And we have a lot of work to do to learn about what settler colonialism looks like in this lands, and learn how to value and uphold the right of safety of Indigenous women and girls in ways that I think we're not expressing right now. We have industries and spheres where that are really unsafe, that are predominated by us. And I remember when the calls to justice came out, I thought, how do we mobilize, like, our community to create better safety, to be better relations to Indigenous women and girls who are experiencing a lack of safety at our hands? Like, we have to be really honest about that. And I don't know all of the answers to that, but I think we have a lot of hard looking inward and a lot of work to do as a community, and a lot of work to understand that taking an intersectional view of gender-based oppression means understanding the ways that communities who experience gender-based violence, intersecting with racism, who have their own histories of settler colonialism, can also perpetrate violence. And we have to think, like, really critically about that. So I think that's a call to action for our community, and a call to, like, decades worth of work that we have to do as relatives who've come to live in these lands.
Thank you. I'm going to give the last word on these questions to Isabel. So if either one of you want to jump in.
Yeah, I think to question number 4, I'm very mindful of my personal background as a male, as a white male, and so I'm very hesitant to give specific suggestions on how to address this topic. I think the best answer that I could give is there are the 231 calls for justice. For different sectors, transportation, government, media. There's so many different areas there that are covered, and I think listening to those who have been impacted by the MMIWG crisis, by survivors, by family members, and I think to invite them into the spaces, particularly in a workspace, and to share. Okay, 231 calls can seem overwhelming in some ways, and I think it's easy to get lost in some of those things. But to make it very concrete, if you work in a specific sector and there are things that the 231 calls to action touch on your sector, invite somebody from an Indigenous community, from an Indigenous leadership, from a survivor, and let them tell you, I think, what their story is, what their experiences is, and I think how they can help, in my opinion. What I will say, I think, in terms of other areas as well, I think, I've mentioned sort of mandatory workshops for youth. I think also, and this is maybe a little bit outside, but for example, protection. I want to touch on protection orders. So when there's violence or the risk of violence, and a protection order is given, and is instituted by a justice of the peace, and then this person who receives the protection order, that is, I think it's an incredible tool, but I think in some ways it doesn't go far enough. And the recent tragedy of the parents and the brother that was killed by the former partner in McCreary, she had a protection order. She went out into the woods for 12 hours. He killed her parents and her brother. He had a protection order. He was supposed to give all of the weapons away. I think what needs to happen in some ways, that if we identify somebody who is a potential risk to somebody else, which is proven by the protection order, I don't think it's enough just to give that person the protection order and to say if you breach that, there's consequences. I think something else needs to happen as well. Somebody needs to check in with him. Somebody needs to have an eye on him, because I think the risk, and we know this from the research as well as from the work, the biggest risk for somebody to experience violence in a domestic situation is when either the couple breaks up or when there is threats of violence. And so I think we need to go beyond just having that piece of paper and instituting something that let's say it's a man who gets the protection order, he is required to attend, or somebody needs to check in with him, because he is at a point where he doesn't have anything to lose in some ways. In his mind, I'm not saying that's true, but in his mind he feels like she's gone, I don't have any control over her anymore, and we need to do something like that as well. Otherwise, the protection order, I don't think is really helpful. I would also say that we've had so many tragedies around domestic violence. I think we need to maybe look at the Domestic Violence Review Committee. I don't know if anybody from the department is here for that. There was a group that would look at a situation when somebody was killed in a domestic incident, and then what kind of improvements, recommendations would be made. That committee, in my opinion, hasn't met for like 5 or 6 years, because that talks more about the systems, right? Like we always talk about these systems, and often there's these silos, things are not communicated, and I think we can do a better job of that as well. And the third thing that I would, can I say one more thing? Oh, yeah. Okay, thank you. The third thing that I would say is, I think, you talked about the work placement, respectful work placement topic. I would also say, I think it's not only the respectful workplace, but also what kind of culture do we have in our workplaces? And to survey how is our culture as an organization, as a company, what does that look like? And you have to ask the people that are in your office, that are in your department. So I think a practical solution would be to say, how do people feel about working here? Do they feel safe? Do they feel respected? Do they feel heard? Or if not, what are the concerns that they have? I think it's fairly easy to do. You can do that anonymously through creating a survey. You can get an external company to help you with that, because I think only then will you understand, okay, how pervasive is the problem. Maybe the problem isn't as pervasive as we think. Maybe it's more pervasive as we think, but we don't really find out until we sort of gauge the temperature on that as well. So I think that would be something to do. And I know sometimes government is slow, but I think we cannot let this go anymore. I think we have to really push. And this is where and this is my last sentence, I think the males in this room, male leadership, I think you can play a role in that. If you're in a position of leadership, if you're in a position of power, you can make that happen if you're in a department. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll keep my answer short.
Okay.
I actually think that when we think about like the different inquiries, like the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry, Child Welfare Initiative, there's been the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. There's been a lot of recommendations that have been suggested in these reports. It seems that when things cost our government's money, they don't want to do them, but they'll do the stuff for free. I just think that to just follow the recommendations that have been suggested in those inquiries, and I think that will be the first step in order to eliminate gender-based violence. And I say that in the sense that I think our federal government, our provincial government, and our civic governments have a very paternalistic attitude towards our Indigenous. our Indigenous populations, and I think our Indigenous populations are more than capable of managing themselves. And that's my final thought.
Thank you. Isabel?
So I have lots of things. I would start with humanizing women, Indigenous women. There is a complete different perspective that society, that men have on Indigenous women and non-Indigenous women. My life is worth less as an Indigenous woman to this perspective of most men in our city, in our country. Non-Indigenous women get more respect from men than I do as an Indigenous woman. My life is worth less. And for me, why is that? Why am I, as an Indigenous woman, not worth kindness? Why am I not worth respect? Why is my voice not worth being heard? Why do I not deserve a safe place to live? Why do I have to keep doing these things to advocate for my life? What makes your life more special than mine? Nothing. Nothing than the perspective that you have in your head. That's all that perpetuates this kind of violence, is your own belief and things that you have been taught. And I think with everything, like he just said, all these working, living documents that are out there, they're free for everyone to access. It only takes a couple of minutes for you to search that out, take some time, read the recommendations in those documents. Those documents are the words of family members. Those documents have the words and are a living, breathing reality of things that we are going through as Indigenous women. When I was assaulted and beaten in my car for 4 hours by a man, that Crown attorney cut a deal with him, didn't give me my day in court. She didn't allow me to even have a decision in whether she was the deal that was going to be made with this person. And this person had 9 other convictions of domestic violence, 9 other victims of domestic violence, and this person still only got 3 months in jail and was able to live his life. And after that, even while on jail, even while on probation, he accumulated 2 more victims. So my one recommendation would be is don't take my voice away when somebody has already taken away my safety. Include women in the conversation when you're sentencing these abusers and these violent offenders. There should be more healing centers. There should be an opportunity for men to get this while they're incarcerated. Because a lot of times, like this one person, just keeps going out and abusing and beating more women in society. There's been no need for him to change his behavior because his sentences are very lenient if he gets anything at all, maybe some house arrest. So I would say, don't do that to women if you're a Crown attorney. Don't ever exclude a woman in the conversation and the sentencing, especially when her safety and her peace was violated. Shed all the unhealthy stereotypes that you have of Indigenous women. Even as when newcomers are coming into this country, they're being taught to devalue us by family members or other community members within that ethnicity. Be a person to say, well, no, really, that's not the way that things really work around here. Pick out the proper and healthier things of your religion and of your culture. Some of the things that we believe in, even Indigenous country, have colonial ties and are not the true teachings and beliefs of our people. And that happens in every religion and every culture. So learn about how it is to be a respective ally to us as Indigenous people. When we're not healing our men, we're only healing half of our society. So then our women are going back to broken communities and broken men. We need to provide supports and services for them to heal as well and to shed that toxic masculinity. But really, everything starts with us as people. It starts with yourselves. Attend events that are around education on how to be a healthy person and an ally to Indigenous people. Educate yourself on current issues and current stats. 2020, there were 201 homicides of Indigenous people. 81% of those homicides were Indigenous men and Two-Spirit people. The ripple effect that it has on our families and our communities. When somebody's mother is taken from this earth, most likely that kid will grow up in care. And then another generation of disconnected people and children from who we are as Indigenous people. That doesn't happen. And then we're perpetuating violence because most of our children do not have a good experience in child welfare. We're training them to be institutionalized when they're in group homes, which also perpetuates when kids don't grow up with touch, when we don't grow up with love, when we don't grow up with hugs and affection. It can translate into violence and violence against women, especially if there's maybe some stuff that they need to work out there. Support and fund safe spaces for women and gender diverse people. We absolutely know for a fact that our women are being assaulted and they're being murdered in the current homeless shelters. Salome Mission, Disraeli, Salvation Army. A lot of our women are sexually assaulted there on a daily basis. So we need to create safe spaces that are specific to our people because they need a place of safety. Can you imagine living your life and not getting safety? When we have kids that are transitioning from child welfare and they're going, most of our kids from child welfare are homeless within this first 6 months. And can you imagine if your child was living at Salome Mission at 18? So we need to find a way to help our communities heal so that we're not perpetuating another generation of unloved children, unwanted children, and where sometimes violence is the only thing that they know. I grew up in violence. That's all I knew was violence growing up. Parties, people being assaulted, me seeing my aunties getting beaten up. That doesn't change until we find and create safe spaces for these people to do the healing. And when we lost 4 women who were preyed upon and taken from these homeless shelters, there was an absolute obligation and urgency from all levels of government and every single Indigenous organization to create safe spaces for these women, and that hasn't happened yet. So just want to say, give us some safe spaces. Educate, speak up, amend your current policy. Get Indigenous consultation when you're wanting to work and change the policies in your organization and in your companies. Bring in our elders, bring in our people so we can guide you in a good, safe way on how you can be a ally to us as women and gender diverse people.
And really, really fantastic stuff there. I did promise that you get to do 1 or 2 final thoughts if you want to. So you have like 1 or 2 sentences, and then we'll, if you have 1 or 2 sentences that you really want to share about anything that is just weighing on you that you would like to, as we were taught this morning, just put out into the universe. Feel free to use this opportunity for that, and then we'll do some closing remarks, and then we're done.
Should I go first? How long can the sentences be?
You're allowed one
kidding.
comma and 1 semicolon.
I just want to leave with this. I would just want to invite men. I think there's a lot of good men that are maybe silent, that are not doing as much as they can. Don't see it as somebody else's issue. Learn more, and in your sphere of influence, try and do something small. You don't have to change the world, but you can and you have to do something. I think you in some ways have a moral obligation, and I think you can do that. So use your voice in some ways, and just push something to change within your company, within your institution, within your department. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Beautiful. Karen?
Oh, I think for me, I'm just thinking a little bit about transformative change around masculinity. I think you said we need to, like, we have a crisis of masculinity, and we need transformative change around around how we express and understand masculinity in our culture. And I think that's so true. I think we need just we need transformative change around how we understand and perform and allow and enable gendered expression in our communities. Because this is long been work that's been undertaken by women, and systems that and structures that women have upheld to create safe spaces and to undo gender-based violence. But the truth is, we all uphold gender-based violence, and we all have a role in undoing gender-based violence. It is men's work, and it's about time that it's men's work, but it's all of our work. To think about how we allow gender-based violence to perpetuate in its many forms, and to perpetuate in ways that intersect with other forms of oppression. So I'm just thinking, we just need transformative change in that way, right?
Ronnie?
I'll just leave with a small story. I remember when I was in high school and I first started, getting interested in women. My dad told me a story, and I was having dinner with my dad one day, and my mom and sister had gone to Toronto, and my dad and me were having a conversation, and my dad goes to me and says, "Son, like, I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions." And I said, "Well, what are the questions?" And he goes, "Your mom, she's a woman, right?" I said, "Yeah, my mom is a woman." And then he asked about my sister. He goes, "Your sister, she's a woman too, right?" I said, "Yeah, she is a woman." And then what he said to me was, "Remember, however you treat women today, don't be upset if a man treats the woman in your life the same way you treat women today." So it's important to always treat women with respect, because if you want your mom and sister to get respect, you have to treat all women with respect.
Thank you. And Isabel?
Everybody deserves a sense of belonging, and everybody deserves safety. Everybody deserves to feel connected and supported in our society. So don't carry what doesn't belong to you. Leave all that stuff where it belongs in the past, like I said earlier, because a lot of us are just carrying on traditions that we don't even know why. And I'll say this, I always wipe my feet. I don't step onto, like when I'm in the shower, I don't step out of the bath without wiping my feet. Why do I do that? I don't know, my mom told me I had to do that, right? I had to do that. It's a bath mat, but you don't get the bath mat wet. And my grandma taught her that. And it was, and I don't know. And so I tell my kids that, "Oh, no, your foot's wet." But where that comes from is that my grandma wasn't allowed to step out of the tub when she was in residential schools by the nuns. And that's where that tradition came from, right? So now my bathroom floor, it irks me because this was ingrained in me, but my youngest daughter, who's 11, floods my bathroom all the goddamn time. But because she has freedom to be a child without carrying on stuff that doesn't belong to her. And that wiping of the feet and keeping the bathroom dry, that's not hers. It wasn't mine, and it wasn't my mom's. It was my grandma's, and that was passed on to her from nuns in residential school. So a lot of these things that we carry, and we don't know why we carry them, but we were just told to. So even little things like that make ripple effects and change your family structure, because even though I'm going like this outside the shower because I know she's making a mess in there, she's a very happy child, and she's very loved, and she's very safe, and in the way that she plays. And I think that's a big thing for me, is just shedding things that don't belong to us.
All right. I smoke cigarettes, and this is the longest I've gone without a cigarette. And I'm not sitting on an airplane, so I am going to end this conversation. But I really want to remind everyone that I know that this was a very heavy conversation. But as the elders told us this morning, we all have roles and we all have responsibilities. And so I think that there was so much wonderful information that was shared up here today, and you all can take our responsibility is to learn from that, and then extrapolate what you need from these conversations and apply it to your role within your own families and your communities and especially your workplaces. Because a lot of the times, as Karen mentioned, we think about these as existing, gender-based violence only existing within the home or the streets. We don't think about how we're dealing with these in our own workplaces, and we're always confronted with gender-based violence in our workplaces. I also want to do a massive shout out to the translators over there. That is in phenomenal stuff. One more time for Hennis, Karen, Ronnie, and Isabel. Thank you so much.
And of course for Levi for being the moderator. Thank you. So lunch has been served. It's been out there for a while. Some have already gone out. You haven't gone out. You can definitely go eat all different things like that. I'm going to just move the podium a little bit because we are going to invite Elder May Louise up to close us off in a good way. I think what was that? No, you can all go. Yes, no, you can all go. No. I think that many of us in the room have come to this journey. Many of us are survivors, and many of us are advocates. So for all the men in the room, if you want to be part of some action change, email me. So you can contact me at edi@winnipeg.ca, and we can be part of ongoing conversations, action items. For those in the room who do not identify as men, know that we support you. Reach out to us and let us know what we can do to help you. So contact us through edi@winnipeg.ca, and we will triage your comments, your questions, or requests to the Intergovernmental Working Group. This is an ongoing group. We meet on a regular basis. So thank you all for your time, your energy, your care, and your attention. And it would be my honor to invite Elder May Louise back up to end us off in a good way. Let me try. There we go.
First of all, I want to thank the panel. That I learned so much from each one of you today. When we speak and tell our stories, we learn about each other. But sometimes we have a hard time listening. Sometimes we have a hard time listening because we're so anxious to tell our stories and to hear from each other. But I've learned over the years since I've been an elder is I have to do more listening than talking. Because you see, when I listen to people, you tell me what's missing in your life just by listening to your story. We think we have the answers to everybody's problem. I have to thank Isabel, whoever she is, there you are. You told the story very well about how our people suffer, because you know that story. You've lived it. You've been there. I feel the same way. That's what happened to me. I was an abused woman for most of my life. All I saw was abuse and harm being done to women. Remember, you only know what you know, and you only will speak what you believe. But sometimes that's not the truth either. How many people will stand up here and speak? And they're speaking their truth. But are they being respectful to themselves? There's a big difference between truth and honesty. You know, truth is what I speak, and the politicians are good at that because most of it is lies. And then they have to go to bed at night and sleep. And when you have not been honest, you see, in your speaking, then you are fooling not only yourself, but all the people in front of you. So our culture and our traditional ways, we have our 7 sacred teachings, and the most important one is truth, you see. If we do not speak the truth, then who are we? Who are we speaking to? And so it's so important, and what I hear, I know all of you who have experience working with the people you experience with, you must remember to learn from them. They will become your teachers. And what that means, that's what's happened to me. I listen to all the women, hundreds of women that I've sat with over the years, and I listen to their stories, and they tell me their truth. And then they also tell me what's missing in their lives. And that's what we have to pay more attention to, those people, all of us who are decision makers, to make life better for our people here in Winnipeg, to improve the lives of all the people that are here, the Indigenous people, the last ones to be heard. And there are a lot of immigrants that come to Winnipeg, and that's good because we have to begin to we always say that everybody is a child of the earth. We are all related to one another. We might believe in different things and believe in different ways, and that's okay. But we also have to accept different ways. One of the things that's happening right now is the big word is indigenizing. That's the big word. So what does that mean to most people? Oh, we'll just go out on the land and walk there on the land with bare feet and we'll be indigenized. Feel the energy of the land. But it's much deeper than that. To indigenize is to think differently. How do we think differently? It's not always about rules and regulations and those kinds of things. It's the heart to spirit listening. That's what it is. Sometimes we think we have the answer for everybody else's problems. I've had a lot of experience with that, and I don't stay there very long. There are a lot of people, I worked for another organization for 6 years, and they brought elders on to indigenize the programs because, you see, that's all their clients. Did they listen to us? No. But they can say, oh yeah, we have 2 elders working here. We try to tell them how to change the programs that we know our people need to heal. When you heal somebody, it's to heal it from deep inside in the trauma. It's not just a knowing. You can know all things in the world and have so much intelligence about human behavior and still know nothing. You have to allow the people to tell you what is missing in their lives. Many years ago, from the time our children were little, we taught them to be responsible. To be responsible for every mistake you make and to correct it. We don't do that anymore. We look after our children. Your son ends up in jail. I'll go pay his jail, but he doesn't respond to what he did wrong to end up in jail. We don't want people to know you're my son. I'll pay you. You just be a good boy. But don't be responsible for your mistakes. We never allowed that to happen to our children many years ago. It just wouldn't happen. You be responsible. If you hurt that person, you go right now and you say, I'm sorry for what I did. Be responsible. And when you're responsible, then you see you are living in spirit, not mind. We allow the mind to control us. It can take us to many harmful places. Stop the mind and start paying attention to the spirit. That's how our people survived, and that's what we did. And that's what's missing in the world today. So when the organizations want elders on board, and we try to teach them, change the way you think, change the way you think, change the way you do things. And they don't do it. They said, I'm sorry you can't smudge in this room. I'm sorry you can't do this. Big mistake. We all need, all of us, I don't care what color your skin is or what you believe in. We must begin to work from spirit. That's my biggest hope, and that's what I continue to learn and to work with our women. That's why in 2 years they were successful in their carpenters. That's why, because we teach them how to work from spirit. So with that, I know it's only by working together that we will change the way things are. All the people we have homeless, we have to think differently when you see the man on the street, laying there on the street, or that woman over there. What do you think when you pass by them? What is your thought? Oh my God, another drunken Indian who's no good for nothing and worthless? Or do you say, oh my God, I wonder what happened to that person? Why are they there? They don't know who they are, they're lost. Work from the heart and the spirit, that's what we must do. Here in Winnipeg, yes we do, work together. Miigwech.
So that brings us to the formal end of today. Thank you to the folks who offered support in the trauma-informed. So Rob and River and Anna for being there online. Everyone else in the room, thank you very much. Feel free to stay, eat, network. Thank you, Chi Miigwech, and we will see you soon. All right, take care. Bye-bye.